Welcome to Planet America, coming to you from the Situation Room. I'm John Barron.
I'm Licciardello, and once again, we have a situation.
46th president is diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer.
There are things going on that the public wasn't informed of.
Really experienced oncologists are questioning, how did they miss this?
A former White House doctor weighs in on the controversy and conspiracy theories around Joe Biden's cognition and cancer diagnosis.
And the mysterious message in shells that some say is a threat to kill the president. But first...
And first this week, to the health of Joe Biden.
Former President Joe Biden has been diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer. A spokesperson for Biden says he was diagnosed Friday and called it a more aggressive form of the disease.
The 82-year-old's doctors say that the cancer has already spread to his bones.
They do say it appears to be hormone sensitive, which allows for effective management.
Effective management, but not curable. Still, according to the experts, there are a number of treatment options.
With prostate cancer, the treatments that we have available can keep patients around for a very long time. The treatments are very effective at controlling the disease, reducing symptoms, and helping patients live for many years.
After news of Biden's illness broke this week, his successor, Donald Trump, issued a very gracious statement saying, "Melania and I are saddened to hear about Joe Biden's recent medical diagnosis. We extend our warmest and best wishes to Jill and the family, and we wish Joe a fast and successful recovery." Nice. And Donald Trump's son and namesake retweeted that, adding, "Agreed, 100%. So far, all very dignified and appropriate, but of course that did not last long. Biden's diagnosis came on the day that audio tapes of his October 2023 interview with special counsel Robert Hur were made public for the first time. Hur was investigating Biden's retention of official documents dating from his time as vice president. The special counsel ultimately decided not to prosecute Biden. The sting in the tail was Hur's assessment that a jury would find Biden a, quote, sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. At the time, that appeared to many to be an inappropriate dig, but after hearing hours of these tapes, it seems entirely fair. There are times when Biden relies on staff for details of things like when his son died.
1 month ago died, May 30th, 2018. Was it 2015 he died?
2015.
I think it's 2015.
I'm not sure the months are, but I think that was That's right, Mr. President.
And what's happened in the meantime is that
To begin with, Biden was pretty sharp, but by the second and third hours, he was sounding tired, his voice faint and faltering, almost as bad as 8 months later in that disastrous debate against Trump. While all of that was going on, another book on the 2024 election was published this week, Original Sin, by CNN's Jake Tapper and Axios reporter Alex Thompson, adds to the weight of evidence that people around President Biden were covering up his failing health.
President Biden's closest advisors privately discussed the possibility that he may need to use a wheelchair if he won re-election because his physical health had deteriorated so much.
More concerning, Biden's alleged cognitive lapses.
The authors write it was, quote, obvious to many at a fundraiser last summer that then President Biden did not know who George Clooney was, even though they were longtime acquaintances, and Clooney was one of the most famous men in the world. The book goes on to claim former President Obama, who was also at the event, had to hop in and finish sentences for Biden during photo ops.
And it didn't take long for speculation to start that maybe Biden already knew he had cancer before last Friday. Maybe he's known for years and it's been part of a wider cover-up. Republican Senator Mike Lee of Utah retweeted a clip of Biden from 2022, claiming the mask slipped. Biden admitted he had cancer when talking about air pollution in Delaware.
You had to put on their windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I had so damn many other people I grew up with cancer, and why can't, for the longest time, Delaware had the highest cancer rate in the nation.
Apart from what was potentially just a gaffe, the advanced stage of Biden's cancer did raise some eyebrows. After all, presidents are usually tested for everything under the sun. Why didn't they detect prostate cancer? According to medical oncologist Dr. Otis Brawley of Johns Hopkins, it's not surprising if previous prostate exams or screening while Biden was president failed to turn up indications of cancer. He says it happens all the time because it's not a very good screening test. Former White House physician turned Republican Congressman Ronnie Jackson, though, tweeted, "Unbelievable that this was missed, but the truth is his physician was more concerned about assisting with the political cover-up than providing world-class medical care." Possibly worth noting, though, that Dr Jackson's expertise was as a Navy doctor, emergency medicine specialist, not in cancer. Still, medical entrepreneur Dr Stephen Key went even further than Jackson, asserting it is highly likely he was carrying a diagnosis of prostate cancer throughout his White House tenure, and the American people were uninformed. But perhaps the silliest take belongs to the president's son, who 3 hours after retweeting his father's kind words to Biden, couldn't help himself reposting Dr Key, adding, "What I want to know is how did Dr Jill Biden miss stage 5 metastatic cancer, or is this yet another cover-up?" How did Dr Jill Biden miss the cancer? Well, probably because her doctorate is in education chairs.
That could be relevant. But I do think it's important to not automatically follow Don into conspiracy territory here, because as Republican Representative and Doctor Greg Murphy said, it's medically reckless to assume Biden's prostate cancer was covered up. Also, doesn't necessarily make sense. If Biden knew about his cancer all along, then he probably would have received treatment for it from the beginning, wouldn't he? So the very fact that his prognosis is so dire today indicates he hasn't been receiving treatment all along. Or maybe he did receive the basic prostate test, or PSA as they call it, but it didn't catch his cancer somehow? Your doctor from before, Dr Key, also said that fewer than 5% of patients who have prostate cancer apparently don't present indications on the PSA. So firstly, that does contradict the other urologists that you quoted, but it also makes that scenario seem pretty unlikely. Having said that, yet another opinionated urologist, so many urologists, told Newsweek that aggressive prostate cancers like Biden's do grow quickly. So they said it is likely that this tumour began more recently and that aggressive prostate cancers often do not produce PSA. So make of all that what you will. There is one other option, though, which we should consider, and this was noted by Dr. Zeke Emanuel, who is a friendly doctor to Democratic White Houses. He raised this possibility.
Maybe President Biden decided he didn't want the test. Many men do decide they don't want a PSA.
Could Biden's doctor have suggested that Biden take the test, but Biden refused it for some reason? Or maybe could Donnie Jr. be right after all, and they did test him, but then didn't tell anyone? Truth is, we don't know. I strongly suggest that a journalist ask him. In the meantime, let's focus on the other potential cover-up. As you say, lots of bombshells about Biden's cognitive state coming out this week. Like, for instance, that Biden at one point kept calling his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, Steve, and called his spokeswoman, Kate Bedingfield, Press. Jake Sullivan does deny that, by the way. Not sure what Press has to say about it all. More concerningly, one of Biden's cabinet secretaries did say that from October 2023 onwards, the cabinet was kept at bay. For months, we didn't have access to Biden. There was clearly a deliberate strategy by the White House to have him meet with as few people as necessary. Now, that there is an issue, John. That's compromising Biden's performance as a chief executive. And if that's true, that's time to retire back in 2023. But I do have to say, my takeaway from all this is not that there was some massive cover-up, at least not a successful cover-up, because the American people were never in any doubt as to where Biden was at. Look at the YouGov polling for the 9 months before Biden's horror debate and compare it to the polling straight after the debate. The whole time, about 60% of people thought Biden was simply too old. The debate, as horrible as it was, changed very few minds because people already knew that Biden was too old. So my takeaway from these revelations is that political parties will do anything to hold on to their president, regardless of the situation, no matter how much they've fallen off the perch. In reality, using the 25th Amendment to remove an incompetent president, it's just not going to happen, is it? Unless they're literally in a coma. So maybe America should consider a presidential age limit. Maybe? Please?
Maybe, but I doubt it, at least not for the next 3 or 4 years. For more on all of this, I spoke to Dr. Jeff Kuhlman. He served as the White House doctor for 13 years under Presidents Clinton, Bush and Obama. And he told me there certainly are plenty of unanswered questions about Biden's cancer, why it wasn't identified or announced sooner.
There's plenty of really experienced oncologists that are questioning, the same thing is, how did they miss this? How can a doctor see a patient physically every single day for the past 12 years, but not, order a PSA blood test? And he's kind of damned if he does and damned if he doesn't, because the reason that we don't order a PSA test on a 82-year-old is, they probably have a 1 in 2 or 1 in 3 chance of having cancer, but they're going to die of something else before 10 or 15 years.
Dr. Kuhlman, your former colleague in the White House Medical Unit, Dr. Ronnie Jackson, said that it is, quote, unbelievable that Biden's doctors missed his prostate cancer, and he went so far as to accuse them of taking part in a cover-up. What do you say to that?
Congressman Jackson is a political operative, is certainly entitled to his political opinion. Joe Biden is 82 years old, so if you look at his physicals, it is interestingly that there is no PSA mentioned, and there is no urology section or expertise that weighed in. From age 70 and above, there are no general recommendations for prostate cancer screening other than that individual conversation between the doctor and the patient. So either he had PSAs done that the doctor or the patient chose not to release, or he didn't have the PSA done during that time.
So, Doctor, from what you're saying, it is possible that PSA prostate cancer tests were being conducted on Joe Biden. They could have been elevated, indicating cancer, but they were not reported.
That's a possibility. I don't have any inside knowledge of that.
And what do you say to those claims that the stage at which Joe Biden's cancer was allegedly identified last week, in fact, indicate that he has had cancer for years, meaning he had cancer as President of the United States?
Prostate cancer is very common. 1 in 9 males in the U.S. Will have prostate cancer in their lifetime. Only 10 to 15% of when people first realize they have prostate cancer or are diagnosed, it actually is metastatic. And that's usually in patients that don't have access to health care. His prostate cancer, the hormone-sensitive metastatic prostate cancer, has been reported to be aggressive, Gleason 9 by the pathology report. And if it's already spread to the bones, then that means that it has been in his system for a few years.
And Dr. Kuhlman, there is growing evidence now, whether it's from the Special Counsel Robert Hur's tapes of Joe Biden in late 2023 to the debate that we all saw, a whole lot of other anecdotal stories coming out from staffers and aides and other Democrats in these series of books to suggest that Joe Biden's cognition was compromised. What do you make of that and the fact that he was not being tested for any cognitive impairment? Should he have been, and should that have been reported?
That's a good question. That's a fair question. Age is the number one risk factor for cancer. It's also the number one risk factor for heart disease. And it's also the number one risk factor for cognitive ability. So there's 3 different things with cognitive ability. Does somebody have dementia that is a progressive, relenting disease that no matter what you do, it progresses and marches through time? At this point, President Biden has not been diagnosed with that. There are other types of dementia. He does have normal age-related cognitive decline. With age-related cognitive decline, an 80-year-old is not the same cognitive ability as themselves 20 years ago. Their vocabulary stays the same, but they have significant deficits in memory, in reasoning, in speed of processing, and spatial visualization, like drawing a clock, things like that.
Mixed economic news for the administration as businesses adjust yet again to the latest changes in tariff rates. The stock market has been recovering for a few weeks now, but even after that recovery, if you'd invested $1,000 in one of the world's stock markets on election day, you'd be looking at much better returns from America's peer stock markets than you would from the S&P or the Dow down the bottom of that table there. And ratings agency Moody's has seen enough. This week they downgraded America's credit rating, although to be fair, that's about a lot more than just what Trump's doing. Moody's explained successive US administrations have failed to reverse the trend of large annual fiscal deficits and growing interest costs. In fact, Moody's are the third agency to do this after Fitch downgraded America's credit rating in 2023 and Standard & Poor's did it in 2011. So this is a long-term issue, but never a great thing when it happens on your watch. On the other hand, some great news on the inflation front. Despite concerns that the tariffs could be inflationary, the Producer Price Index, which measures wholesale prices, fell by 0.5% in April after a flat reading in March. And if we break that down further, goods prices were flat last month after falling almost a full percentage point in March. And services experienced the biggest price drop since the index began in 2009. So that is good news for Trump. Maybe he's right when he keeps on saying...
And he maintains the position that foreign countries will absorb these tariffs.
Then again, maybe he's not right, because price pressures might be about to take their toll. Toy giant Mattel has said they'll raise their prices because of the old 145% China tariff rate. It's unclear if that will remain the case with 30% tariffs, but they've also said they're going to go from producing 20% of their US sold goods in America to producing 15% of them there. And it's fair to say Trump didn't react well to that news.
Mattel, I don't know, I'm not so sure. They also said, they're the only country I've heard, they said, well, we're going to go counter. We're going to try going someplace else. That's okay. Let him go, and we'll put 100% tariff on his toys, and he won't sell one toy in the United States, and that's their biggest market.
So now Trump wants to destroy American companies that cross him? Although at least he did give Mattel an upgrade to country status, so that was nice. But then it got worse when one of America's biggest companies, Walmart, said they're going to do their best to keep their prices as low as possible. But given the magnitude of the tariffs, even at the reduced levels announced last week, they're simply not able to absorb the costs, given the reality of narrow retail margins. And they said higher tariffs will, of course, result in higher prices. In response to that, Trump empathised with real compassion and feeling. No, of course not. He just berated them, demanding they stop blaming tariffs for raising prices and that they and China should eat the tariffs and not charge their customers anything. That's strange, John. I distinctly remember Trump promising us that China would eat all the tariffs themselves, so there shouldn't be any tariffs left on Walmart's plate for them to eat, should there? Odd. Anyway, things are delicately placed for Trump when it comes to the economy at the moment, but at least so far he is escaping the dire scenarios that economists and us have been imagining.
Time will tell, Chaz. Now, like many countries, America is seeing declining birth rates and has been for some time, but the Trump administration is keen to change that, and they hope to do that by offering a few bribes that maybe they can pay their way into a baby boom. Here's Melina Wicks to explain the growing influence of the pro-natalist movement.
The Trump administration wants Americans to have more babies.
Have a baby and get $5,000 for it? That is just one of the ideas that the Trump administration is reportedly tossing around to get birth rates up.
That's a lot of money. Not compared to the estimated $237,000 it costs to raise a kid, but it's still a very generous rounding error. The birth rate in America is at a historic low. But is that actually a problem? According to YouGov, your answer may depend on how you vote, with conservatives more likely to say there's not enough children being born in the US, and liberals more likely to say there's too many. Some pronatalists advocating for more babies are happy for liberals to sit this one out.
We don't really want to market natalism to the progressive feminists. The people maxing out their fertility should be people, ideally, who won't raise their children to be gender-neutral furries.
Yeah, progressive feminists are weird. Not like people in the pro-natalist movement.
We're going to have more than 7 if we can, basically, until my uterus is forcibly removed in a botched surgery. I'm going to keep going.
Very normal. There are real problems with declining birth rates, like Social Security, which funds benefits for retirees and depends on having more young people paying into it than older people taking out of it. That's a problem that could theoretically be addressed with higher immigration, but that's gone out of style. Besides, the birth rate in Latin America, the biggest source of immigration to the US, is barely higher than rich Western countries. A lower fertility rate tends to go hand in hand with good things, like women having better access to birth control, education, and jobs. But if the falling birth rate is a problem, can it even be fixed? It's not like governments aren't trying. Taiwan has spent more than $3 billion trying to get its citizens to have more kids. Many European countries offer generous paid parental leave and childcare. Australia, along with Russia, Italy, and Greece, have tried baby bonuses. Singapore even teamed up with Mentos to make a rap video encouraging citizens to celebrate their national day by making a baby.
Singapore's population, it needs some increasing. Forget waving flags, August 9th we be freaking. Like a government scholar, I want to cram real hard and tap you all night like an easy link card.
If that didn't work, I don't know what will. The reality is none of these government interventions have reversed long-term declines in the birth rate. So if the government can't convince Americans to have more babies, maybe the answer is just accepting a lower birth rate and adjusting accordingly, with comprehensive Social Security and immigration reform. That's not so hard, right?
Now to the outcry created by an image posted this week by former FBI Director James Comey, who is now the author of legal thrillers. Comey wrote, "Cool shell formation on my beach walk with the numbers 8647 on the sand." Now, not unreasonably, that was interpreted as somebody writing that America's 47th president should be 86th. But what does 86th mean? Well, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, it means to throw out, to get rid of, or to refuse service to. It comes from 1930s soda counter slang, meaning that an item was sold at, possibly rhyming slang for nicks, 86, nicks. But lexicologists do also say in some contexts that term has evolved to mean something more sinister today, to eliminate or kill. So, cue the outrage.
Fox News alert, Homeland Security just launched an investigation into former FBI Director James Comey for threatening to 86 President Trump.
Wasn't just Jesse in a lather. Donald Trump Jr. was so worried about the impact of Comey's image that he reposted it to his 15 million followers, declaring, "Just James Comey causally," I guess he meant casually, "calling for my dad to be murdered." Trump himself is in no doubt what Comey meant.
If you're the FBI director and you don't know what that meant assassination. And it says it loud and clear.
Now, James Comey quickly explained that he did not realise that some folks associated those numbers with violence. It never occurred to me, but I oppose violence of any kind, so I took the post down. Too late, Jim. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard was straight onto Fox News.
The rule of law says people like him who issue direct threats against the President of the United States, essentially issuing a call to assassinate him, must be held accountable under the law.
Do you believe Comey should be in jail?
I do.
Not just jail, some of Trump's supporters were using AI to imagine a less drastic but decidedly messier punishment.
Hey, bombs away, bombs away!
So the Secret Service then talked to James Comey. We will see what, if anything, happens from all of that.
Tell you what's not going to happen, what Gabbard said directly after that grab that you just played.
Any other person with the position of influence that he has, people who take very seriously what a guy of his stature, his experience, and what the propaganda media has built him up to be, I'm very concerned for the president's life.
Yes, James Comey's stature is such an inspiration to millions that all the Comey heads out there are going to immediately feel compelled to kill Trump because of that stupid seashells post. Sounds likely. And there were some even more incredible stretches out there, like this attempt to mind read Comey from Kari Lake. James Comey put out a message to his deep state buddies that essentially says, hey, deep state, we're all effed unless someone offs Trump. Seems like an order for a hit on the President of the United States. Comey knows as long as President Trump's alive and fighting for the American people, Comey and his corrupt cabal are doomed. John, that tweet diminishes us all. Yeah. And those kinds of takes are obviously in bad faith. Do I need to remind you that Trump tweeted out pictures of an abducted Biden hogtied in a truck? And MAGAs loved it. I mean, Matt Gaetz literally tweeted out about 86ing politicians himself. No one thought he'd had Mitch McConnell and Ronna McDaniel murdered. MAGAs have been happily buying 8646 merchandise for years without any concerns for Biden's welfare. And here's my favourite proof of bad faith, right-wing activist Jack Posobiec, who literally himself tweeted out 8646 back in 2022. But now he writes, the former director of the FBI is calling for left-wing assassins to target our president and kill him. Have no idea why he hasn't been arrested yet. So these people should not be taken seriously. In fact, even if Comey was saying he'd like Trump to be killed, well, that's protected by the First Amendment anyway, so still no arrest. But I guess we should ask, what was Comey actually playing at with that post? Firstly, to be clear, he almost certainly did set those shells up himself. As you can see, he's quite fond of shell-based protests on his Instagram. But also, what does Comey do for a job again? You said before, he writes 1930s-style detective books. So of course he uses 1930s-style soda counter slang. Mystery solved. Although some people have suggested an alternative explanation, which is not unreasonable. Comey has a new book coming out this week, and its premise is that free speech is being used by America's internal far-right enemies to provoke political violence, habitually line-stepping in public provocations to stir their followers to so-called stochastic violence against elected officials. So, could all this be a lame publicity drive from Comey where he reenacts the premise of his new book? Faux outrage clickbait for the purposes of promoting some merch? Sounds pretty 2025 to me. Maybe one day we might even turn it into a movie.
Now please excuse me. The library is closing in a few moments. I'll arrange for us to stay a little longer.
Marcus, I've seen this window before.
Where?
Right here. Dad's diary. You see?
Look. 8. 6. Where's the 47? "47. Comey wants to kill Trump."
Yeah, I think they did worse sequels than that one. And that's it for another trip to Planet America. We'll see you back here at the same time next week.
And we've got the weekend edition on Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern on ABC News. See you then.
Bye-bye.